Jono, welcome to the Democratizing SEO podcast. How are you doing today?
I am great. Thanks for having me. How are you?
I'm well, thanks. Very well. Thank you so much for agreeing to being on. I've wanted to speak with a technical SEO who's had the vast amount of experience that you have. So yes, it's a pleasure to be speaking with you. You have an interesting take on technical SEO, which we'll get into as we go along. What I like to do with all my SEO guests to begin with, I like to ask how they became an SEO, because everyone has an interesting story, right? Everyone gets in by some weird related field. So I'm curious, how did you become an SEO professional?
Sure. So I remember a board weekend when I was 13 and I taught myself HTML. And like the second I grasped it and understood how nesting tables worked and how you construct things and put them on a page, I was obsessed.
Hmm.
Um, and then by 16, 17, I was like selling small businesses locally, little websites. And I found I was I was struggling with something, which was there was a whole bunch of ambiguity. So, how do you write a good alt attribute? What How long should a meta description be? Like, what on? How does the title work, and how is that different for all of these things? And this was like very, very early on, and all there really was lots of other people's opinions. And I went for years kind of obsessed with this idea of how do we make a perfect website? How do we do really crafted semantic HTML? I'd never heard of technical SEO at this time, but it was very much what I was doing. So I was, selling
Right.
websites and building them with this kind of idea of how do we make them as best as they can be, and then fell into agency life, discovered that the thing I'd been doing was definitely technical SEO and that it was connected to marketing and analytics and this whole other world. And then, went on from there, worked at agencies, tool vendors, and just kind of continued with that root obsession of if HTML and CSS and JavaScript are like the ingredients, how do you bake the perfect cake? I'm still not sure I know the answer, but it's fun exploring.
You know, technical SEO is gets a rap for being technical, quote unquote technical, but it sounds as though you have you entered it via creative flair. It sounds like there was some creativity to it. Would you say there is a creative aspect to technical SEO?
Oh, that's a lovely thought. I like to think so. So I'm in the physical real world very uncreative. Like my handwriting is unreadable. You hand me if I try and draw something, if I try and make something, at best it's going to fall apart. At worst, I'm going to injure myself. So like I find myself very frustrated creatively in the real world. But put me in front of a screen, and I can dream in CSS, and I can see how things might come together in different ways. And none of that's quite core SEO, right? But it is tangential to it. And if we look at where SEO is going and how important things like user experience and web performance and differentiation are, that's hugely creative. And it's technical tooling that we use to deliver that. It's how do we write our code? How do we understand what's possible? And I find that deeply interesting because you look at the large proportion of the web today, and a lot of websites are still rectangular boxes with colors and backgrounds. And you go, no, think about what we can do. We can do 3D transformations. We can tie into the graphics card. We can do phenomenal push notification. We can do anything. All
Hmm.
the creative tools. What even is SEO? It's executing that to the best of our ability. Maybe.
When I think of technical SEO as a pillar itself, right, I've seen it change over the years, and it's almost as though technical SEO has become a lot more, it's gotten deeper into technical SEO. All the pillars are getting deeper, I think. Say content, for example, a lot of creatives are very much into storytelling to improve their
Yeah.
content writing. And I find that technical SEOs are, if you like, blurring the lines between web developers and SEOs. How has technical SEO changed in the years that you've been a practitioner of it?
Oh, it's evolved beyond recognition. I think I did a talk at MozCon in 2018 called Democratization of SEO. So I'm on brand. And the premise was exactly this. It's that now also we need to be experts in performance, which at the time was relatively new, right? That's a whole discipline that suddenly you go, okay, hello, this is ours as well. and security and increasingly accessibility. And as of relatively recently, we need to kind of deeply understand JavaScript. There's all these pillars that are bolting on that I think in the same way as a lot of SEO, it's become harder to be a jack of all trades and to manage all of it. It's increasingly important that we become good at bridging those other disciplines, and we help the performance people, the security people, the accessibility people understand where SEO sits in relation to them and the rest of the organization. So yeah, I think whilst I take a lot of joy in being a nerd and getting hands-on with the code, I think the future of technical SEO is very much similar to the rest of SEO. It's about being a facilitator and an educator and finding ways to help other people scale and implement that into their roles. But I'll still be coding.
It's interesting you say this, because I have the same sentiment. So I have experienced both client side, agency side, and now as a contractor, right? And I believe that is the case for client side SEOs. When it comes to SEOs who are agency side, there is this problem, especially when it comes to agencies that are known for a particular pillar. So technical SEO, for example, an agency that offers technical SEO, that is all that they offer, right? So they don't venture into other areas. And what I've found, and this is also from experience, seeing how other technical SEOs perform agency side, what I realize is they essentially have to stick with technical SEO, whether or not that is the main thing that the brand, that the website that they're working on needs to focus on that issue. So what is your take on how this dynamic affects, so the democratization of SEO affects SEOs who are agency side?
That's tricky, isn't it? So there's an initial challenge that I don't think you can ever get past, which is that the kinds of clients who hire and rely on and outsource to agencies are already a particular subset. They are either resource starved or education starved or outdated, or think, but like there's some flavor of dysfunction there, which if they had infinite budget and infinite capability, they would in-house. You just would. I think there is still potentially a strong argument that agencies breed talent and experience in a way that you can't in-house, and maybe that's valuable to tap in from a consultative perspective, but that's the minority. I think in the real world, many organizations outsource to agencies because they need to spend the resource of the money differently. So you've already got the challenge that they are dictating what they want and what they think they need. And challenging that is hard, right? If you get brought in and the brief is fix our site speed, and you go, actually, your biggest problem is your brand isn't differentiated and your products are too expensive and you've got a crappy reputation and fixing your site won't close the gap. You might win that argument, but even if you do, maybe your organization isn't resourced very well to deliver it. I see this all the time. It's super hard. I think also maybe the technical SEO people have an advantage in this space because it's easy. Some of that stuff is more binary than, say, content strategy, right? If your canonical URLs are broken and wrong, you fix them, then they're fixed, in theory, if you address the underlying causes in the process. But trying to outsource something like help us build our brand equity, it's open-ended, it's gray, it's vague, and you're constrained by a monthly budget with having to do monthly deliverables. So you invariably end up looking at links over authentic, deep stuff, etc. So yeah, that side I don't envy. I think the technical SEO people maybe have a bit easier, that you can just go in, fix and improve the stuff and wash your hands and move on to the next thing.
Yeah.
Maybe.
Also, something that just came to mind is the whole idea of tools and say plugins for sites like WordPress, Wix, etc. They cover a lot of the technical SEO issues, and they're doing so a lot better these days. So is this leading to a case where a technical SEO will have to go above and beyond what the tools already do? Or is it a case of, well, there will be no technical SEO in a couple of years' time?
I really hope it's the former. I really like the idea of people going above and beyond. I did a talk at SearchLab in 2015, which was like a deep dive into how to optimize your WordPress website. And the premise was the plugins will get you very easily to 80%. And you know what? Maybe even now, as you say, it's got better. Maybe that's even 90%. But that extra 20 or 10% is where the competition is, right? If 80% gets you to the bottom of page 2 on Google, great, congratulations. Like the brands who are invested, the brands who are competing do so in those margins. And every brand is different, every website's different, every strategy is different, or at least it should be, otherwise you're not going to win. Those edges and those boundaries are, I think, a really interesting place for technical SEO, because it's micromanagement of scale, of crawling, of indexing, of configuration. It's tweaks to schema, it's iterations on HTML markup, that each of which isn't going to move the needle. But if you're doing one of those a day for a year, might mean the difference between you beating a competitor or not, because these margins are so thin in those like 10, 20%. So yeah, I think technical SEO, certainly for larger sites with scale problems like e-commerce, but even smaller ones where you're looking for some kind of technical advantage, be faster than your competitors, have a logo that's an SVG instead of whatever it is. Like there's millions of little opportunities here that the plugins will, and the add-ons and the platforms will never solve comprehensively and perfectly for your business, because the use case is going to be different, the details are going to be different, et cetera, et cetera. So yeah, I think there's always a space for that kind of optimization. And it gets bigger because now it's also performance, security, accessibility, et cetera.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, as I like to say,
and developers get stuff wrong, right?
Yeah, exactly. As I like to say with SEO, it's I like to look at it in terms of two levels. Level 1 is what's on the website, right? Or for the website. And that is something, usually it's more a reactive level. Something has to occur first and then it's fixed. Level 2 is the more difficult area, which is if you're improving the way the different departments, teams, individuals work together. And I find that level takes a more proactive approach to SEO. And the better you're able to liaise with these different departments, let's say developers, for example, the more you'll get results. And I think the difference maker in SEO is within that level. In other words, the brands, the businesses that are operating on that level, at a high level, at a high state, are the ones who are going to succeed in the very near future of what search is going to look like. What's your take on the whole reactive versus proactive way of solving technical issues?
I agree completely. I think it's easy to forget how young a discipline SEO is. And we kind of came in from the side, banged a lot of drums and made a lot of noise and said, fix our stuff. Because we entered an ecosystem where people had websites and content management systems that had never considered how they would be crawled and indexed and parsed, etc. Now we're starting to get past that. And it turns out that we're discovering in hindsight that the rest of the development and engineering and IT culture has processes, and they have documents, and they have acceptance criteria and test scripts, and etc. And some of the best SEO I see doesn't say you have 143 hreflang issues. It says, let's evaluate how your internationalization setup works and describe technically what the acceptance criteria for this feature should be. Let's have examples of what good looks like. Let's describe edge cases and unhappy paths and what might happen if it's a Tuesday and it's a full moon and the server, all of these scenarios. And then you operationalize that and you build software and systems rather than fixing stuff from the outside. But you're right, so much of the SEO industry is still, I've got a new client. They say they want to do better. Okay, I'm going to crawl the site. I'm going to count the number of 404 errors and missing meta descriptions and give them a to-do list. And you maybe, realistically, we all know that 10% of that list might get done and the rest will languish there forever, because you're not improving the underlying organization's operational capabilities to be good at this stuff. And that's also hard. Like that's much harder than saying, go fix this stuff, because you're talking about people and processes and budgets and politics. And as external people who know what good looks like, you're calling the CEO's child ugly. You're saying the CTO has done a bad job.
Right.
You're offending and upsetting a lot of people who didn't know that they weren't very good at their jobs. And now you're like, all of this is hard. But yes, I think that is the more grown-up version of SEO.
Yeah. Doesn't the whole idea of creating list from tools of things to fix, checklist, if you like, typical SEO checklist, doesn't that make SEOs lazy overall?
Yeah, I think so. There's some pros and cons, right? So if I'm doing a tech audit, um, I don't have a list. I don't have a process that I follow. I look at the site and I crawl it for sure with a bunch of tools. And then I look at what I find and I think about it and I compare it to what I know and I spot opportunities. And that usually does a great job. I can prioritize, I can ignore the stuff that the tool would just produce list. But there are definitely cases as these tools get better that they're increasingly good at spotting things that I might have missed. And I know, for example, Sitebulb has put a lot of work into a kind of intelligence layer on top of their core. So rather than saying we have found 3,404s, they'll try and say it looks like there's a broken link in the footer across this template. And you're like, okay, that's the level of insight I want to deliver. I don't want to do just like this list of errors. So yeah, I've been really anti-lists forever because I think you're right. I think it stops you actually looking at the site and thinking about it and trying to understand what's going on. But the tools and the lists as a process may be useful as a kind of fallback to go, okay, I think I found all the big things. I think I understand what else might I have missed. So there's a place for both.
With these tools, as the more they get, if you like, intelligent, or the more they show intelligence, does it mean SEOs coming into the industry really have a higher barrier of entry, and they have to be a lot better? Let's say an SEO executive, technical SEO executive today, does that person have to be a lot better than a tech SEO executive of, let's say, 10 years ago?
Yeah, I think so. I don't think I now would hire the me I was then now, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
I think, the barriers increased because, not least of which clients' expectations have increased because we've all been doing this for a while. We've all seen a screaming frog audit. We all know that the site migration ought to involve some redirects. We all know that Shopify has problems with these are fairly standard things. And the people who were like junior account managers in agencies at the time are now brand managers in house, and they've worked with people who. I think I think the barrier for entry has definitely increased, and and will continue to increase, like to the point where the organizations who are winning will define and push that standard, and it will mean that you need to be hiring people who help organizations get on top of this and aren't just like running reports and making lists of 404 hours. It's going to be hard for agencies.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you envision a world, a reality where every website, from a technical point of view, is quote unquote fixed?
I really love the idea of this. I think about it a lot, and then talk about it a lot. I see a general. There's a lot of things coming together that are making that vision more achievable. It's still practically very difficult to make a perfect website, and more so in the real world. I think I'm in a position of privilege where I have enough time and resources and permission to go and play and explore what that might look like. And I hit the same kind of constraints that everybody does, that all technology is trade-offs. Like I can make my site faster, but then it will cost more to run because I'm throwing more resources to it. Or I can add more, all of the, it's really hard to find the right intersect for all of that. But the tooling is getting better and better and better. And as you look at platforms like WordPress, as architecture like Cloudflare, even systems like Shopify and Wix are pushing further and further, I really love the idea that websites and brands shouldn't have to compete on technology. They should compete on the quality of their service or product or whatever totality of that brand thing is. And it's really sad that you might have a phenomenal butcher or baker or something have to learn about hreflang or canonical URLs and have to care about that stuff and have to be concerned about site speed and security, because if they're doing that, they're not baking incredible cupcakes or carving furniture or whatever. So the closer we get to removing all this technical stuff and all this marketing stuff, the better market we create, the higher, more people can focus on quality. I think there's a lovely vision of a better world there, but we're not there yet. But yeah, I think you can get close to solving most of these problems. The WordPress ecosystem especially can power that, though there are problems there with things like, the plugin ecosystem is a nightmare, and WordPress's own brand management and marketing is a nightmare, and all sorts of issues. But we are getting better. We're getting closer.
a lot of the marketers who started 10 years ago or so, they might look at the new reality that we're approaching, i.e. AI in search, and say, well, we don't really need a technical SEO person. We can have someone trained in using AI, creating prompts and getting efficient at that. What is your take on AI being used for technical issues? Or sorry, to resolve technical issues?
Interesting. I think as a coding assistant, it's super powerful. I've been playing with Copilot and some other stuff when I do a lot of coding in my spare time. It can make you quite a lot faster, and it can spot and avoid bugs that I might have made. But it makes some interesting decisions. It makes its own mistakes, and it doesn't have the full context of what I'm trying to achieve. So you still need somebody who is competent and capable from a technical perspective. But it certainly can be a massive time saver. I think more broadly in SEO, I'm slightly existentially scared that everybody thinks we can just now start generating content at scale. And if we get good enough at prompt engineering, maybe we can train systems on our brand tone of voice, and maybe we can generate articles that are yada. I think there's two problems with that. One is the whole EEAT thing. The timing is not an accident. That Google understands that the way we make purchase decisions in particular is heavily influenced by authenticity and human connection. And that stuff is super hard to automate, not because it's not hard to generate the words, but because it's hard to authentically create that differentiated value and then demonstrate it. Like that's really hard to do without having your CEO be interviewed on the radio about something he's passionate about and then stop that without just faking it. So that one problem is it's that gap is hard to close. The bigger problem, which I think nobody is really thinking through, is that the entire concept we have for content marketing is about to break, I think, which is as a brand, we go, okay, I want to understand a market opportunity. So I'm going to get a list of keywords, and through either SEO or PPC or something else, I'm going to compete on those. So I'm going to create 20 landing pages for my 20 keywords and create some content, knowing that Google will come and crawl that, index it, and then serve it in the results. Well, that doesn't happen anymore because they have no incentive to serve your page in the results. It's the zero-click thing, but even more because they also now have no incentive to index it. Because if I'm writing a page with a lasagna recipe, they have enough lasagna recipes. Lasagna is a solved problem for Google. And when you look at all this narrative around they're not indexing as much, Gary on a recent podcast saying they have no incentive to index low-value content. It's not just low-value content. It's content in solved query spaces. So it doesn't matter how much you want to rank on lasagna and how good your landing page is. Google doesn't care. And like, not only then does that break your SEO, it also breaks the whole AdWords ecosystem because ads for those kinds of topics are served in that search process as an interstitial, no longer exist because it's a solved problem. And we're all still going, I want to write some landing pages for my content and I want to fix my technical SEO without realizing you're trying to compete in a market that doesn't exist. So that's going to be really fun.
Yeah, I find the whole search generative experience fascinating because personally, I think it's going to be the biggest change, I would say, in the history of search. It's certainly going to be the most dynamic since universal search. The entire thing is changing. It's not just a case of organic results are being pushed down, although that is a big problem. The way people search is changing. And from when I think of what Google are doing, what I find a lot of SEOs aren't talking about in the industry is social media platforms are heavily influencing Google. And I believe this because they're looking at a lot the way people interact on social platforms and seeing that operation as a threat, and the way Google acquires information, acquires content is outdated to the way social media does. So the whole idea of Google or the platform, marketers and users, everything is going to change when search generative experience is released worldwide. And my thinking around all of this is SEOs will have to change their approach and stop focusing on the whole indexing as a first step to eventually being ranked for keywords. What is your thoughts on search generative experience taking up what SEOs have historically worked on in the last 25 plus years? And essentially Google is saying, well, we no longer need these resources, which are websites, because we have this 25 years worth of data. As you indicated, there's no need for publishers anymore for certain keywords. Where is the win for SEOs?
This is the question, right? What on earth do we do? I'm not sure anyone has any good answers. I think this is an extension of the same existential crisis we've been having since zero-click searches really became a concept. And we're kind of waiting for Google to tell us how we should make money, and they're just plowing on quite happily. There's a few possible directions, right? One is it turns out SGE is rubbish, which is definitely not impossible. I think there's a question around its quality and relevance, but there's also a behavioral shift. Like all the demos you see of it where they're showing it off, people are writing entire paragraphs into the search bar, and that's just not how people behave. And the effort to train them to search that way in order to get better results is a huge amount of friction. And it's the same kind of friction we saw with voice search, and we all know how that went. It didn't take off to the degree that we all expected it to. So I'm dubious about the problem this is solving. And then also, is the output and the results good enough? Are they reliable enough? And are they a better enough experience than conventional search for people to want it? There's a really interesting psychological consideration, which is, whilst getting shown a list of links in the conventional search results and having to look at them and think about them and choose one feels like a dysfunction. And Google definitely see this as a dysfunction. I think there's an element of the human experience which wants that. You want to feel in control. You want to feel like you're making your own choices. You want to feel smart for recognizing the branding first isn't the best brand and clicking on the second one, recognizing a logo. All of that is quite a rewarding endorphin-y thing for controlling your own search experience. If we remove all of that and you just get served a result, we might lose some trust. We might lose some autonomy. That might backfire a little bit. I don't know. It's interesting. And then, what are we all doing to create content, to influence and populate these kinds of systems? I think there are a few tactical things. I think it might have been Kevin Digg recommended that everybody gets much better at thinking about thumbnail optimization in the way we should have already been with Google Discover and YouTube. That makes sense. Like, the images are going to be one of the ways you can stand out in here, so trying to draw some attention. The more ethereal kind of angle is, I guess, we can invest in trying to influence the training sets and the content these machines consume. Even though they're already very well trained on the content that's out there, there's a lot of new stuff that emerges every day, and they have to get content for that from somewhere. So trying to influence and create content that other people reference and cite that becomes the training set, maybe an angle, though you're not going to see any direct money from it. I think the other route is really double down on structured data and schema, and consider how your website becomes a database of factual information, not about topics in general, but about specific things and entities and objects, because they're going to have to consume that, because there's going to be types of queries where they need specificity in the results and not just generalisms. But then there's a really interesting question of, as you say, if we're not prioritizing crawling and indexing, where does that live? What is my website for? Maybe I should just sell a data feed to Google. And we get to a world where your website is like 50% generic brand storytelling and 50% database for machines. I don't think we're well equipped to think about web design and development in that way yet. So who knows? It's all going to be very muddy.
Yeah, everything is up in the air at the moment, and chances are Google will eventually come out on top. But I do see them panicking. I noticed a year or so ago that TikTok had introduced a search feature. And, you know, for years, I've always found social media fascinating, because there is a search element to social media, right? And the way people operate on social media, I believe non-marketers, non-SEOs, almost expect Google to operate in that same sort of format. So when they see results on Google, they think that's Google producing the results for them. And of course, you know, technically in a sense they are, but we SEOs, we know or the details behind all of that. We know that it's websites, publishers, etc. I don't think people on social media, when they search, they consider that it's not Google providing the information for them. It's websites. And all of this led me to think, if social media is winning users who are, mind you, the same social and on search, Google search.
Yeah.
Does this mean Google has to make a change in order to survive? And I see on TikTok, I noticed on TikTok about a year or so that they're promoting people to search for stuff. And I'm thinking,
yeah, that's interesting, isn't it?
Have you noticed it as well?
Mm.
It's very, when I see it, I just can't help but think this is them trying to take away that audience, especially the youth audience. So Gen Z and Gen Alpha and even the younger audience. I think they search on the platform that they are on, rather than considering Google as their platform to search, if that makes sense. And if that is the case,
I agree.
If that is the case, what is going to happen to Google's market share?
I think there's a few more moving parts in that are really interesting. I saw, is it Lily Ray, maybe about 2 years ago, clocked that Amazon were running a whole bunch of adverts as well, trying to encourage people to start their search in Amazon. And Google had run a whole bunch of competing ads trying to publicize the fact that you could search for products in Google. So yeah, there is a war happening here. And I see a few other moving parts. We know Google are panicking about TikTok because it's where the youth go to discover. And that whole kind of ambient, passive, we're still calling it search. I think it's not quite search in the same way, but that I'm scrolling through, I'm discovering, I'm consuming is something which is completely alien to Google, but it's where people are discovering brands, building preferences, etc. And we see Google panicking in reaction to that and going, quick, put short form video in, and not really understanding that's a different thing. I think Google Discover, we kind of undervalue as an SEO world a bit because it's a bit different and was very Android centric, let's say now. But also the idea that it's even more of a black box than conventional search, where optimizing for it doesn't involve a keyword and you have to be relevant and you have to be timely. And it turns out that's quite difficult, especially if you're an agency just buying links. Like, it's hard to build the systems that generate that kind of relevance. But one interesting thing I do see, I think the way that Google are reacting to this is they are very, very much doubling down on the transactional e-commerce and slice of the pie. And we look at what's happening with Google Merchant Center and Google Shopping and Google Organics results, all increasingly just becoming one kind of soup. I think that's super interesting because also I spend a lot of time in the schema.org ecosystem and looking at structured data. And when you look at the GitHub repository for schema.org, where they're deciding what's going into the standard, because all these things end up becoming rich result formats, etc. The stuff that's in there that they're discussing and debating are feature requests from internal parts of Google and Google teams looking at how do we help websites provide us more information about their e-commerce products, their stock availability, the colors of their shirts, their checkout URL formats, because they want to expose that kind of stuff, scrape it, consume it, and use it to make the Google search experience even more transactional and producty. There was some stuff the other day, right, around the ability to go straight to checkout processes from within a Google SERP and loads of stuff around this. This is very much them going to war with Amazon in the SERPs, because I don't think they can compete against TikTok and Instagram, etc. I don't think they can win discovery. I think this is the revolution has come and it's gone and it's happened. And Google is not the right format for passive ambient reception of content at all. Not even Google Discover. They've got a foot in the water, but it's a fundamentally different thing.
If you were to project into a couple of years, who do you think comes out on top?
Canva. So there's a whole bunch of debate around Shopify versus Wix, Google versus Amazon, etc. I think we are all underestimating the power of the creator economy. And like the extension of the Google, you see Google getting more and more transactional, less and less content-y. Great. It's where I might search if I want to buy a thing or look up a brand, but it's not where I'm spending my time. And now we have all of these people who the cost of getting online, the cost of having a web presence, the cost of manufacturing, of shipping, all decreases to pretty much zero. Instagram and TikTok as places you discover and find micro producers, micro creators, and they will all be using Canva as like Shopify already lost. You look at the kind of market share shifts. The biggest grower in the space at the moment is Canva. I'm really interested. No, they're probably not going to win, but they're the one I'd be looking at as an outsider for now. I think a lot of this will come down to does the EU manage to break up part of Google, and what are the actual practical implications of that? Because if they're heavy-handed on that, they break the internet. If they're too light touch, nothing changes. But either way, everything changes immediately overnight, and that the fallout of that action determines who picks up the pieces.
Yeah. I think that battle is going to be a fascinating one I'll be keeping a close eye on. Another set of changes that I am really interested in is how the lines between users and marketers are blurring. So, with tools, plugins that you have on websites, it makes technical SEO easier for non-marketers. And what I'm seeing now is there is a big push around user-generated content as a product. And I'm seeing more people get onto creating content for this purpose. And this, they're creating this almost with no consideration for technical SEO, because that doesn't factor in, right? So they can just focus on content. And I find that because of that, they have a narrow target to their users. I'm finding that they know their users a lot more than a typical SEO would, and focus on them. And they're seeing a big win in this area. Do you see user-generated content increasing as the years go on?
I think until recently, no, but recently, yes. I think that forums died largely because SEOs killed them, and comments on websites died largely because SEOs killed them. But now you look at the space changing, you look at the rise of Instagram and TikTok, you look at the gradual slow death of Twitter, look at Reddit becoming the world's only trusted resource outside of Google. In the more tech space, things like Hacker News, championing authenticity. I definitely see a rise now of people going, we should own our own equity and build a moat. I should, instead of building on Instagram, I should have a website. I should run a forum. I should allow comments, and I should have some kind of, maybe a small closed garden, maybe a small open garden. But yes, excuse me, starting to incentivize and manage that content. I think recently there was an update from Google saying they would make extra effort to identify websites which had forum results, because it's particularly interesting that there are some types of queries where the best experience is a discussion and not a singular perfect answer. And forums kind of uniquely occupy that space in a way that articles and websites and brands don't. So it's really interesting to see in 2023 that becoming a thing again. I think there is a huge space for more websites to have more open discussion, especially if you look at the kind of EEAT challenges. There's only so far you can go to make yourself appear authentic and expert by making sure you hire the right staff and the right writers. There is a next level of that where you go and we influence and curate a community who all discuss and agree and reinforce that. See places like Healthline doing a good job of this, where and a lot of, in fact, the fitness space in particular, you see them managing groups of opinions and experts, and the whole thing serves to reinforce the fact that that brand is a good shepherd. What is a better recommendation and endorsement of the kind of site you would want to see in the search result, want to consume the content of these 10,000 people all live here and believe in it and reinforce it, and they've got flywheels around that for promotion mechanisms, etc. So I think UGC harnessed, and not just, oh yeah, we allow some comments, but really to bake in a mechanism into your product and sales and SEO strategy where people are creating content that's valuable, that's useful, that's adding some kind of value over time. Yes, now more than ever, bizarrely, is super impactful. Who would never have guessed this, right? We've had a decade of going narrow down, less is more, focus, be the brand, and now we're like, no, get the human angle back. It's nice.
Yeah. If Google are focusing less on indexing and discovering any and every site, and does this then mean they're more focused on the brands rather than what the brands have to say, i.e. being brand led rather than trying to gather, find, discover, index any and all information?
I don't know if brand is quite the right word. It was for a long time. Right? There's all sorts of quotes from Google going back. Yeah, yes, yeah, maybe. But I think the thing we still need to remember is that this whole ecosystem is page centric, and that brand is an emergent property, right? And like we can all debate, like, is the concept of domain authority, aside from Moz's metric, like the concept of domain authority a thing? And John will say one thing, Gary will say another. I have an opinion. All of these are just emergent properties of web pages about topics. And when you look at things like the search quality guidelines, where Google are employing people to evaluate the quality of websites, of web pages, they're not looking at websites. They're not going and browsing domains and brands. They're going, I have searched for a topic. This is the website I've been presented. What is the totality of the experience in there? And some of that is signposting through to other pages, and here's our about page and stuff. But really, that page-centric mindset is where it's at. So whilst, yes, brand is absolutely the thing we should be optimizing for, but historically that's meant do a big anonymous website. Now it means stand for something, mean something, demonstrate that, and make sure that every single page reinforces that narrative and shows it throughout all of your content, and have a human face and a human name, and show that your CEO went to some university in the local area and has all of these things. But doing that in a way that's meaningful. I think brand historically has meant run lots of billboard ads, and now it means be relevant and be valuable and authentic and transparent and all those things.
Yeah, which it's interesting you say that, because that is the way social media platforms operate. So Google, again, they have to adapt, otherwise they're not going to maintain market share. If this is the case, what does this mean for a new website, or let's say affiliate, a new affiliate who's created a website? Are they essentially not able to compete with existing websites or brands?
I think the affiliate space is fascinating, because most affiliate websites are garbage, right? They are minimum viable effort, maximum viable adverts. How do we scale this? Like, there's very little intrinsic value there. They are representing somebody else's proposition with some kind of veneer tarred over it. And that's 90% of them. But you do a good enough job, and you add enough value, and you become a better brand than the brand themselves. And there are real winners in this space. People like Money Supermarket, like Trainline, there are others where they provide so much value onto. So they are fundamentally usually some kind of comparison engine, but they do their own research. They provide their own guides and expertise. They have named people with faces who are employed. Finder.com, really great example of this. Started off in Australia, got big, went international. They started off as a comparison site doing articles. And then it turns out that if you hire people who are experts, who have expert opinions, who can curate, research, recommend, compare, you start to beat those individual brands, but you create something more and bigger and better, where actually it's a far better user experience, because and the potential winnings for that kind of play are huge, because individual brands can't authentically compete on comparison keywords and be impartial in comparison spaces, etc. Like, it just doesn't work. But these brands can. So you can elevate yourself above, and you can do some really interesting plays. But that is super resource intensive, and it's a harder play than just being a brand that sells the thing, because you have to scale it across all of those brands. So yeah, I think a lot of entry level affiliates will struggle, because if you're just writing a lasagna recipe to sell lasagnas, somebody else's lasagnas, Google ain't going to index that. And yeah, it's going to be really hard to enter that. But if you go all in and you say, I don't know, the white goods space for dishwashers and washing machines, super complex, super impenetrable. The websites are really dull. They're all crappy e-commerce. What if we elevate that and we provide a resource where we guide you through, we have experts, we buy the things, we test them, we tell you how much laundry you should run, how whatever. There's a real opportunity to add value, but not cheaply, not easily, and not quickly. So you've still got to build a brand.
Yeah, the coming months and years, and I don't think we have that long to go. I think it's going to be a matter of months. It's going to be very...
It's the end times.
I find the expansion beneficial. I'm a creative person, so anything that's expansive to me is just I see opportunities. When you think of technical SEO, what makes you remain in the industry?
Ooh, interesting. A few things, I guess. One is the non-creative bit, that I quite like, that these are all solvable problems, that something like canonical URLs, it's a finite space. And like, so I wrote a 4,000 word document a couple of years ago at Yoast about how every conceivable edge case of canonical URL should be handled. Like, if this is page 3 of an author index for July 2018 that's no index, what should all possible scenarios. So that's quite interesting, but that's done. So I think there's two big areas that I think continue to be expansive and fascinating in tech SEO. One is performance. I'm a huge performance optimization nerd, because it's quite horizontal in the same way that SEO is. It touches lots of areas and disciplines. There's lots of small tweaking. There's lots of experimentation, and it's very closely aligned with quality. Like, if you're making a site faster, you're usually making it better. And there's a whole kind of carbon eco angle, which is quite nice, like we save the world a bit. So that's fast. And it's a space that changes even faster than SEO does. Like, every day there's a new, it turns out if you do this tiny little CSS tweak, you can shave off 5 milliseconds. I will get out of bed early for 5 milliseconds. That's awesome. And the other thing is structured data and schema.org. I think we are still quite early on in the revolution, but we are starting to get to, like, Tim Berners-Lee's original vision for the internet was a connected ecosystem of things that could communicate and connect. And it never happened. We never got there. We built the World Wide Web. It's not quite the same thing. We have web pages and links, and that's about it. So the whole structured data thing, I think, is really exciting, where you go universal syntaxes, websites as databases, the ability to interconnect all of that, create new business models, new ideas, new value. That's super exciting. And schema is starting to get some of the way. And it's only really happening because Google and the SEO space has incentivized the adoption and the education around that. But we're at day one. So I'm really keen on looking at schema.org and structured data beyond just the kind of rich result formats that Google rewards today into a bigger, more expansive, how do we describe our entities, our brands, our products, our content verbosely, but technically and consistently. And I think that's super interesting. That will unlock a whole bunch of tomorrow stuff that we have no idea what that will look like.
What website or brand or business do you look at and say they are forefront within the whole schema space?
Oh, tricky. Who's winning at schema? For a while it was Apple, but they fell behind. Tesco did some incredible stuff, but they fell. I don't know now. Like, there was quite a lot of early pioneers in the kind of 2011, 2012 space, and then it all went a bit quiet. And now really all anyone's doing is the rich result stuff, because there's no incentive to go beyond that. I guess, really sadly, my sites, like there are a few people in the SEO industry who are really going all in. There's Martha Stewart from Schema App, there's Jono, who's doing independent stuff. There's me, there's a couple of others. I guess their clients who's using Schema App, whoever's on them, they're kind of enterprise level, but yeah, they're pushing and going beyond just the bare basics.
And I'll add to that.
I'm frantically checking out their clients page now to find out.
I would add to the list you just mentioned, IMDb, just because
Oh, interesting. Yeah.
that they have been very consistent and niche as well. And I think in the years to come, or ideally, the websites, SEOs who have websites, if you like, IMDb level. I was going to say Wikipedia, but like you mentioned with Apple, I think they have fallen behind, and I think Google have long left them behind, whereas IMDb is still specialized. One issue with Wikipedia is it's a generalist site, and because of that, it's a big issue. Whereas IMDb, specialized.
Yeah, and their schema is super nice. I'm just looking at it now. That's great. Yeah, and this is exactly what I'm talking about. Like, their website is not just a marketing pamphlet for humans; it's a database for systems. And if we say half of all web traffic is crawlers trying to learn about our stuff, like if we call ourselves digital marketers and we're only marketing to half our audience, like what are we doing? I talked about this a lot recently. This idea that we should be marketing to machines as well. Like if the objective of marketing is to influence the narratives and perceptions and perspectives that people have of our brands, these systems, whether it's Google or Facebook or Slack or Twitter or WhatsApp or Outlook, these things form perceptions as well. They understand our brands in different ways. So we should be investing resources in trying to control that. So yeah, IMDb is a great example of catering to both types of audience.
Which audience
I love that.
Is more important, users or machines?
I guess the easy answer is users, but then we've got to consider what the role of the website is, right? If we're talking about a world where more and more discovery happens in TikTok or Google Discover or whatever, and the role of the website is less as a destination and more as an input for things like training ChatGPT and feeding SGE, maybe the bots. I'm not sure I like that world. I like the idea that websites are equity that we ostensibly own and domains are a thing and that we build content and mailing lists. I quite like that. I'm not entirely keen on a world where all of that just becomes subsumed into some kind of input for Google. There are other platforms, there are other ecosystems, there are other platforms that could exist that wouldn't in that world. I think that's quite important. So yeah, let's stick with users and let's say that websites should solve human problems, but also secondarily feed the machines.
Yeah, in a reality where we're going to have a battle between the verses, Metaverse, Appleverse, Googleverse, all of these verses are going to collide in the coming years. And one of them, actually, when I think about it, I'm still debating. I'm not sure yet whether one will come out on top or whether we'll have a situation like Apple and Android, where we have two different platforms. But I do think there'll be a predominant leader. How big of a lead they'll have, I'm not sure just yet. I don't think it will be a case of Google pretty much dominating as they do now. I think their market share is definitely going to be broken up. But again, all of this is expansion, which is great opportunity. And I think for SEOs, we are in a unique place where we understand both users and machines. So the future's bright.
It is. We just have no idea what it's going to look like. And I hope the main winner of that is Google. Like at least Google is built on and thrives on, and in theory reinvests into the open web, whereas your Facebooks and Amazons are all walled gardens. And I don't think any more or less evil, but I think that distinction is valuable. And if we look at the propensity for them to do evil things, that's harder to do on the open web than it is behind closed doors in the Amazonverse. So, I'm going to gamble on Google.
Yeah, my money's on Google as well. Jono, thank you so much for your time today. We're now in the second half of the year. What are you looking forward to this year for the rest of the year?
I guess aside from International Talk Like a Pirate Day on September 19th, I am looking forward to some holiday at the end of the month. And I've just quit my job. So I'm leaving Yoast to become an independent technical consultant. So I'm looking forward to attempting to pay my mortgage for the second half of the year, I guess, hoping to not be homeless by Christmas.
It's funny you mentioned that because I think this is the mindset of SEOs. There is something innate within us that leads us to want to discover something new, and all of that
Yes.
is that excitement. I think is what keeps SEOs as SEOs.
Hell yeah.
Is there anything websites, anything you want to plug or shout out?
I guess just me. I'm going to be on the market as an independent technical SEO consultant later in the year, specializing in web performance, schema, thinking about all the stuff we've talked about. I have no idea what shape or form that will take, but yeah, I'm at jonoalderson.com. And it'd be lovely to hear from people. But thank you so much for this. This was lovely. It was really interesting chat. Really good questions.
Pleasure. I'll have your website in the description below so people can get in contact with you.
Awesome. I need to update that. That's what I'm looking forward to, updating my website.
Awesome. Thanks a lot, Jono. Have a brilliant day. We'll catch up again another time.
Nice one. Thanks a lot. Catch you later.
Cheers.